Well, it's 7:02, so I think we'll start. Although our first speaker is still having a little bit of computer issues, but he assures me he will be back in one form or another. So I'd like to welcome a couple of guests first. Jan Dorner from the is currently with the LWVIL voter service, but she's been on the state board for many years, and she handles observer training and other issues for the state board. So she'll be with us to talk later. And also I'd like to welcome Cheryl Bedinsky, and Cheryl is from the Peoria League, and they're also talking about what to do with their observer corps, how to make the time that people spend watching these government bodies more impactful in our community. And so, Cheryl, thanks for coming. And I bet you will have a few things to add when we get to that part of the meeting. Before we start, Ann Panthen, our Vice President, is going to tell us about a few upcoming events, and then we'll see. We'll try and get started right away.
Okay, so for the Champaign County members, we have there's a board meeting coming up on Monday the 13th at 5:30. We have our office hours coming up December 15th, Wednesday at noon. So that's a half-hour meeting. We have on January 10th, another board meeting. And then January 12th, we have a conversation with the league, which is sort of a semi-monthly sort of thing. This month, in January, it will be with Tracy Parsons, who works for the city of Champaign, and he's also the Champaign County Coalition Coordinator. And we'll be having a nice conversation with him about what he's up to and what is happening with the coalition. And generally what they do is address violence in the community. So that'll be sort of interesting, and hopefully you can make it. That'll be a registration event. So be sure and watch for that link. So that's what's coming up.
Okie doke. And I think we have one more thing. We have an actual social in-person event, our holiday event, which we've decided we can't manage to fit it into December because everybody's always doing something, so we do it in January. And I forget the exact date. Teresa, you know? Teresa, I'm sure knows because we're having it at her house.
Yeah, it's January 21st. If that's a Friday, that's when it is. Let me double check. And it's 4:30 to 6. And there'll be, it's the 21st. It's a Friday. There'll be information in the voter in January, and you'll be getting reminders and so on. So everyone needs to be vaccinated to come, though. That's what we are asking.
Okay, and I think in the participants, I don't see that Brant has managed to sign on again. So
he's on, but he doesn't have a camera. Let's see if we can hear him though. Brant?
Yes, you can hear me, and I'm about to give up and go back to my cell phone unless somehow Zoom detects my camera. So I'll give it one last try, and then let's just go on. So
okay,
Zoom is always full of new tricks. So
yeah. So while Brant is sorting that out, I'd like to introduce him, and he is the Distinguished Knight Foundation Chair in Investigative and Enterprise Reporting in the College of Media at the University of Illinois. And boy, that is a long title, but I know what that means is he is a lifelong journalist, and he has been following for his whole career the changes, the massive changes in news reporting that we've seen with the decline of local newspapers and and things like that. And that's certainly the topic that we're trying to address tonight. So, Brant, do you want to continue there? Or you want to take a couple minutes and come back with your?
I'll take a minute. I'm just going to come back on my phone.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. And our other speaker tonight is Jan Dorner from the State League. And Jan has been with the league for, we were chatting before the meeting started, and she said she has been observing for 30 years, observing her local school board. So I'm sure that perhaps by this time she knows more about the school district than school board members, because there's nothing like having that kind of continuity to sort of pile up the information that you gather. Okay, I see Brant is back, so why don't you start? You're muted though. You have to unmute.
Hold on, there we go. It should be unmuted.
It is now unmuted, yes.
Okay, great. So I wanted to start by sort of telling a little bit of the story of what I've been doing with local coverage and what I started doing when I got here and what I think I need to do in terms of getting community news out there and watchdog kinds of monitoring of state government actions more out there, given what's happened to the News Gazette with it going through bankruptcy and having the staff severely cut yet again. When I got here, the diminishing of mainstream news had already begun in 2007. There were already cutbacks that were hard to see at that point, but from a journalistic standpoint, coming to a new community, I could see that we were, there was news we didn't have and news that we were losing in terms of just knowing what government was doing. The first thing I noticed, which was not affected by anything in particular business-wise, was the fact that you couldn't get restaurant inspections here as you could in other communities without doing a Freedom of Information Act request, which I found really surprising. There were no placards like in other cities on restaurants and so forth. So what I found was that you really had to push hard to get with this basic information for the public, especially when it comes to public health. And so for a number of reasons, I raised money to create something called CU Citizenaccess.org, which runs out of the journalism department. And one of the campaigns I began was to make sure that restaurant inspections were public to everyone. And there's been a lot of things that my students and I have done to try to expand the public's knowledge of what's going on with public money and decisions that are being made. One of the things we've done is we've had to get databases. I don't know if everyone knows this, but if you want to look up property by an owner's name, you cannot do it in Champaign County. You can do it in any of the surrounding counties. And we've been puzzling over that for some time. And finally, I think we got kind of an honest answer from somebody that must have slipped up, which is that people running for political office for county political office, do not want people to know what property they own. It could be that simple at this point, which is fairly surprising. Periodically, we've gotten the entire property database, which you can get under Freedom of Information Act, and done stories where we found that some people were claiming the Homestead Exemption Act as many as 150 times for their properties. As you know, the basic reason for that law is you get an exemption for the house you live in. But we have landlords getting as many as 150, 200 exemptions. So we've really been trying, we called it citizen access, just to get so that people could get information. But as time has gone on, we've seen that you can't even really get news on what the city councils are doing, what planning commissions are doing, and so forth. So I've been working on a plan to work with more and more people so that the basic information of what happens in a particular meeting can get out there. This semester with my public affairs class, which is advanced reporting, I decided to run a test of how open government can be about the salaries that is agencies, councils, commissions, salaries they actually pay public employees. Are those salaries public? So we did, I think, about 20 Freedom of Information Act requests, the councils, the park districts, and so forth. And I think only about 8 really got back to us with data and information we can use. By law, any agency needs to post 75 salaries of employees that make $75,000 or more. They need to post those salaries with name, salary, compensation. It's written in law exactly what they need to do. We found, for example, Unit 4 doesn't do that. That gives you all the information except the employees' names. And they thought they were doing it. I think we finally got them to do that. But this is basic public information. This isn't even getting to council or commission actions. And so I've had my students try to fill in on things we aren't getting, like the park district information, looking at minutes of meetings and so forth. So, I'm really interested in talking to everyone tonight on who might possibly be able to help with tracking government. I'm also in touch with some people nationally. They're working on some automated machine learning and figuring out ways to get out the agenda of what every agency has if it posted on a website, so that you can at least know what actions are going to be taken by various commissions or councils. And some people are working on some basic artificial intelligence, so you can get at least the basics out of minutes on what happened. But long and short of it is, I'm trying to work with my students to get out information I think we all care about, and to figure out what actions are being taken that can really affect us. And I think with the new ownership of the News Gazette and the cutbacks, the lack of news has really become clear. This is something happening all over the United States. There's a project, I can send people links to it, called News Deserts, being worked on out of North Carolina. We not only have news deserts, we have what we call ghost papers. That is, that they do have some staff, but they're barely functioning in terms of getting the news and public service, public interest news that we're used to getting. And under the business model of advertising, where advertising pays for a lot of news, that is completely broken and is a failed business model for news. So I'm also working with a lot of nonprofit newsrooms that want to move from donors to subscriptions, and are filling the gap in a lot of what we've lost. So basically, we're in a critical moment of loss of news, which is, a lot of people have mentioned, is loss of democracy, loss of knowing what's going on and what you can vote about, things that I know all of you have been talking about. So I was really interested in talking with everyone tonight because of the projects I have going on, and also really want to make sure that I have, limited news staff, although I'm trying to raise some money for some professionals to pick and choose, the students to pick and choose among the stories and issues that they should really cover. So for example, in the class, my public affairs class and not my investigative class, I've got one student is very good looking at trash hauling and why we have all the trash haulers that we do, who do damage to our roads, because you have 5 or 6 going up and down some neighborhoods every week. Another student looking at how grant money for neighborhoods is being spent in Urbana and so forth. So that's what I'm up to. That's what I am interested in doing, interested in expanding. So happy to take questions and discuss and figure out how we can monitor government. You certainly know what can happen if you're not monitoring government. If you look at what happened in Dixon, Illinois, where you basically had someone that walked away with tens of millions of dollars from a small community.
Last week, we had a conversation with Jeff D'Alessio, who's one of the editors of the News Gazette, and he said something that really struck me, which is that people were interested in what's going to be happening today and not what happened last night. And as sort of one of the reasons why he didn't cover a lot of meetings of government units, you know, they're in that way sort of old news. And I think, you know, there was a time, certainly I can remember, when they covered every single meeting in detail before and after. So that doesn't happen anymore. And when you ask people about their local government, they virtually don't know anything about their local government. They may know who their mayor is. They may know what county they live in, but their general awareness of local government is really woeful. So hopefully tonight we can talk about some ideas about how to share the information we get from observers so that it can fill a little bit of that gap. So,
everyone should know that I grew up covering local neighborhoods in the business. I started out at a local paper covering neighborhoods, councils, school boards, and all that sort of thing. I like Jeff a lot, but I would disagree with him. I think he has to say that when he's down to 5 reporters, depending how you count them, and that Jeff has to do a lot of the work. The fact is, people want to know if there was some vote that affects their taxes, or some zoning vote that means that you have a factory being built next to a residential neighborhood. I will say, I've never, in my experience, seen people maybe as aware of their government as they should be. But when there's an issue that matters to them, that is affecting their property, their life, their safety, they get very tuned in. You know, a lot of people just want to get to work and enjoy their family and get back. But you certainly get the attention if you do some decent reporting and you say, yeah, this factory is going to be built here, or that 90 acres of farmland south of you is actually going to turn into a great big development. So with all due respect to Jeff, who I admire for sticking with the ship, people do want to know what's happened.
So if people have a question, then why don't they raise their hand, and Anne, you can keep track of that and call on people if they want to ask the question themselves. So
Sure.
If anyone has questions for Brant, we can do that now. You want to think about that?
Jane?
Just curious whether you're still getting journalism students.
Yes.
In the same levels,
Yes,
same levels you did in the past?
It's been gone up and down. There was something a few years ago called the Trump bump. For all his attacks on the press, Trump, I believe, helped increase journalism enrollment and interest in investigative reporting. Is there a Trump dip? Not so much. It's not that we don't have students truly interested. It's when you have a big business disruption. We get journalism students, and some of them go into PR because it pays so much more to pay back their loans. But I think there is a really growing interest, whether people are in journalism schools or not, of young people getting to journalism. Example I would give to you is I helped co-found a network of nonprofit newsrooms in 2009, now called the Institute for Nonprofit News. There are 20 founding members, basically. There are now 360 vetted nonprofit newsrooms that are full of young, interested professionals. They're doing a lot of the work that newspapers used to do, and not trying to do the work that newspapers didn't have to do anymore. There's a lot of event stuff that just comes out on social media that you don't necessarily need to cover. So the short answer is, yeah, I've got students. I actually have my 2 best classes in about 5 years this semester. So yeah, there's a whole new band coming, and they care very much, and they're worried about their world, and they're really worried about climate change and all sorts of issues, social justice. So yeah.
All right. Karen.
Yeah, I had a comment. It seems to me that several bodies, at least in the Urbana city government, have posted. They post their agendas and they post their minutes, the draft minutes, and the. I do the planning commission, so I know this from that. And then they post videos. Yeah. But that's great that it's there, but it's really not accessible to people. They need that boiled down. They need the important points pulled out and put somewhere where everybody goes, because it's just a lot of material to have to plow through. I know.
Well, we had a joke in newsrooms as I started out. It's always continued. There's 2 ways to sort of put up a blockade against journalism. One is deny, don't show the information you have. The other one, we had people who told us this, is to overload the journalists with all the information you possibly can. So they're so overwhelmed, they can't figure out what to do. And quite frankly, journalists have learned how to deal with that kind of overload. But if you are a citizen, you don't have time to plow through all that. And I think people are finally realizing that good journalism does serve a real purpose. And, there's something called push technology. Well, that is what journalism does. It pushes out the information that between the people reading or seeing it, and the journalist agrees the information they need. And so there's no question who has time to look through all those videos. And quite frankly, I've gotten deep into data journalism and digital tools because there are software and algorithms that can help us sort through all this stuff too. So journalists are having to up the ante in what they know. But yeah, you can post everything. It's like you can build it, but will anyone come? And we're in that situation now. Even the public bodies, they're doing the right thing legally they should do in terms of putting up agendas or minutes. Unless they push it out, or journalists report on it, how are you going to know about it? So one of the things a number of us are looking at is setting up automated alerts for people, so that if you're living in a particular neighborhood or have a particular interest in an issue and the algorithm is scanning through it, it's like taking all the stuff that Facebook does badly and turning that into good. You will get alerted to, the planning commission talked about an area near your neighborhood and it came up. So that's a big challenge. The numbers of journalists that we've had over the years that we had 20, 25 years ago, those numbers aren't coming back. That's the bad news. The good news is the journalists that are here and they're coming on board have digital and data analysis tools they never had before. But yeah, if I were serving on one of these boards, I would go, don't blame me and we put all the stuff up. But the fact is, there's too much to take in. You need somebody to sort through it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which leads me back to the observation project.
And do we have any other questions?
There's a question in the chat that says, does the public have access to the information you and your students have gathered on citizenaccess.org.
Yes. We're putting up a lot of data. All the salary stuff I talked about, that's being posted. It should be prominent on the site tomorrow. The former student who's sort of the managing editor and a data whiz is trying to make sure that's all organized well enough and that we can continue to add to it. By the way, the Better Government Association of Chicago publishes salaries from all around Illinois, but the problem is it has to be a year old. It's such a huge project. But anything we can find, we put up there, and we're putting into searchable databases. So yeah, and cross our fingers, you may get to see pretty interesting maps about gun violence in Champaign and Urbana next week if we can finish that project up before the semester. We basically have tried to map every shooting possible that we've had, and also do an animated map that shows how the shootings have spread over the last 5 years. And a preview of that, I can tell you that you'll see with the clusters of where the shootings occur, and I think why they've even got more of our attention other than the enormous number of them, is you can see they've drifted westward in Champaign in particular, along Springfield Avenue and just north and south of there. So, and that's data that'll be searchable, and you could click on one of the dots and get all the information. The problem we have too is by not being able to be as vigilant, having enough journalists, is the police collection of the data has actually been fairly fractured and inconsistent over the years. The Champaign police had a sort of all hands on deck in the spring, so that they actually could have a database of all the information about all the shootings over the last couple of years. If you'd have active monitoring of government or enough journalists, I don't think we got into that situation, because there would be constant pressure. We need this data, this amount of data, this specificity of data in order to understand what the heck is happening in our community. So I think we're already seeing various outcomes of not getting the information on a regular basis.
Okay, I have one question, and this may be a rabbit hole, so we may have to shut it down. But the question is, it seems like people are getting their news in different ways through social media and that kind of thing. And that's so much more dispersed and uncontrollable, so to speak. And that seems like one of the reasons why people aren't really reading news is because they're reading their Facebook feed or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's not, it might have been a rabbit hole before. It's not too much of a rabbit hole right now. I start with a practical example. I have a longtime good friend who was an investigative reporter, and eventually got a partner and bought a group of weeklies on Long Island. And then he sold that, and he's got another group of weeklies. What does this have to do with Facebook? Well, Facebook should drive traffic and interest to his weeklies. But he really doesn't want to have anything to do with Facebook, because he says, yeah, they drive traffic to me. They're all crazy, because Facebook's algorithms are based on involvement. And if you can stir people up, it's sort of like the old yellow press. The more sensational it is, the more crazier it is, the more traffic you can get, but it's unreliable and it's more problematic. So I think people are slowly starting to try to figure out what's a trusted site, what's a trusted feed of news. And I think we're in the midst of that right now. But right now, yes, it's very fractured, and Facebook and Instagram have done enormous damage to the credibility of news, because they also haven't really vetted what they're pushing out there. They know what news is, and they're trying to throw, $10 million, maybe $20 million towards helping newspapers and nonprofit news sites get better traffic. But if their algorithm attracts the most shrill and angry people, it's not helping the news at all. So yeah, we have an ongoing problem. It's finally recognized. We finally are starting to get maybe some solutions to dealing with it, but it's tough. And plus they, of course, put everybody in their own bubble and echo chamber, which exacerbates the adversarial nature of discussion right now. But I really do think we're going through this stage of understanding it. And I think the public has finally gotten that the news we depended on, the local news, and the way it's coming in, that is gone. That tradition is gone. So we've got to figure out how we get the information that we can trust in a better, more reliable and consistent way.
Yeah. And I think you said we have one more comment, and then I think we're going to have to move to Jan Dorner and the programs that the state is aware of. So one more comment, and then thank you very much, Professor Houston, for giving us our time, because this is certainly something we're all aware of and all concerned about. So
yeah, I get these stories posted. I'll send them to you folks, and so you can check out Citizenaccess. I will have to say there was great hope after we got that restaurant inspection project going. The most traffic we've ever gotten on that site was restaurant inspections, and the News Gazette was happy to reprint all those stories. So we're renewing that. So people do want good information.
You have a relationship with the News Gazette, so you can share.
Yeah, they're to the point that their editing is limited, and Jeff has to really pick and choose now. But for a while there's a lot of Citizenaccess stuff ending up there. So I'm trying to make sure people know what the website is and to check it periodically. And hopefully we'll get the news getting pushed out more as we go along in the coming year.
Yeah. Okay, and one more comment.
Yes. So the question is, will the printed newspaper die since few to no young people take it?
It's dead. It's over. Okay, the print may come back. The advertisers don't want to do print. I mean, some of the people, they're more our age, do, because they feel it may be more reliable to see a coupon, but those are electronic. My students do not read newspapers. It's going to be mobile based, most likely, or something like it. I'll miss it terribly. I grew up working in newspapers, and there's nothing like seeing your story come out off the printing press and seeing it delivered all around that, like the movie Spotlight. But it's really not to be too brutal, it's a dead man walking situation. I have friends who want to save newspapers and all that, but the newspaper's over, but not news. And in fact, we have the capacity to get better and more accurate news if we get a hold of the technology a little better. But yeah, every time I see a headline that says something about saving newspapers, I'm like, and quite frankly, I'm working on a book on the rise of nonprofits and business models. And in my research, there was a top consultant for the publishers, newspaper publishers of America, who in 1981 told those publishers the outlook for newspapers is bleak because the penetration of newspapers, that is, the percentage of readership, have been going down since the 60s. Circulation might be up, but population was up. So yeah, it's been a long, long death spiral. And to be in a newsroom is great. To be in a newsroom depending on the newspaper is not the future. Or the present.
Well, we'll have to figure out. I mean, most of us here are probably still newspaper readers, so trying to find a way to, as you say, push what we learn out. We're going to have to use new models, and that's going to be a little bit of a discussion among us because the way we used to do it just doesn't work anymore. So,
yeah,
thank you
I
very
still
much.
get two newspapers in my driveway in the morning to feel good and one in my mailbox. But that's sentimental.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. And we'll turn right now to Jan Dorner. Jan, I think.
Thanks.
you're-
Thanks, Tricia.
Okay.
I'd like to just introduce Kathy Kenney, who's on the state board. She's the vice president of voter service for the state league. So she is my boss as far as voter service is concerned. Any questions you need, you send any questions you need answered as far as voter service is concerned, you send it to voterservice@lwvil.org. It goes to Kathy and it goes to her co-chair, Melissa Lieb. So, but I wanted to make sure that was, no.
Well,
Thanks,
Miss,
Jan.
I-
Thanks, Jan. I just
No.
want to say hi to Cheryl Budzinski while you're setting up your screen. Hi, Cheryl.
Melissa was a great help when we were figuring out how to do forums, candidate forums in pandemic situations. So I'm sure she'll be busy this spring as well.
Right. So I just took about 8 or 9 slides from the observer training. Our next observer training is January 6th. To register, this is the site. It's on the member bulletin that everyone should be getting in their email box. But Tricia said that she'll put it in the next voter, January 1st. So this is January 6th at 7 p.m. And I really like this slide. These are people that are interested in being observers. They're good listeners. They summarize and interpret proceedings in a fair way. They're interested in local government. They're able to serve as an ambassador for the league. They're discreet and courteous and not working a personal or a partisan agenda. That's key. We discussed the mechanics of the observer program, about knowing the law, about the Open Meetings Act. The Illinois Attorney General had a training on Open Meetings Act. It is required of every elected official and some appointed officials in Illinois to take the Open Meetings Act. Unfortunately, beginning of April, his site got hacked by ransomware. He did not pay it. And I think it's still down, although the other day I was trying to find it and it looks like he's got another site going, but I wasn't able to find the training for the Open Meetings Act. There's also training for FOIA, for Freedom of Information. But there's 24, the Open Meetings Act says when an agenda has to be posted, where it has to be posted, and there's 24 subject areas that are exemptions to Open Meetings Act under the executive session or closed session. So that would be personnel. That would be students when you're talking about a school board. That would be coming up with a price if the governmental agency is buying or selling a piece of land or a building. You don't want to tip your hand to the prospective buyer or seller by, telling them what the lowest price you'll take or the highest you're going to go or whatever. We talk about working with those being observed. Tricia can send a letter, a note. You can bring in the letter and say, this is introducing Jan Dorner. She's an observer with the League of Women Voters of Elmhurst. That's my local league. You can communicate your role to the members being observed. And the observer just watches the proceedings, not because they're assuming something's wrong, but elected officials are public figures. And observers are there to ensure the public's right to know. And as we just heard for the last 40 minutes, we're not getting that in press. You want to establish good communication between the governmental officials that you're observing and to have a positive impact. So I did look up your, oopsie. I did, and so I'm going to see if I can switch to, sheesh. Okay, so this is, these are board docs. This is your Champaign Unit District 4 schools. This is what my individual school district uses and our city council uses. So you go to the meetings. The last meeting was December 1st. You don't get much when you do here. If you click on print the agenda, you don't have to print it, but you can click on detailed agenda. Now, this one I did look, and this was a special board meeting. This was all on student discipline. So none of this is going to be public. At the very end, you can have, they're going to have public comment so that you could show up at the very end and say, I'll be the new observer from now on, and then they adjourn. And you're not going to see anything as far as, let's see if we can get to a different date. Here's a regular meeting. Oh my gosh, this is student discipline as well. Holy moly. So this again, this will be action taken on closed session because they cannot take action in closed or executive session. This is executive session. So this might be student number 204772 is going to be expelled for the next year. And you would not know what that would mean. Let's see if there's any detail here. So here's apparently, is this Dr. Boozer? Is Dr. Boozer the superintendent? I'm going to guess. The superintendent has a board slide presentation here that you can look at. Here's the levy presentation. Strategic plan. This is all really good information, and hopefully they post it 48 hours before the meeting, because then as an observer, you can go through that all. I go through it all and I write up my report before I go there. So I know what they're talking about. I know where they're going with it. And then during the meeting, I can make adjustments to the report. So let's see if I can get back to, I'm doing it again here.
One of the things that's so wonderful about Zoom is you don't know if what you're looking at is what other people are seeing. But you're back to your slideshow.
Yeah, there we go. Now I'm sorry. I got it. I got goofed up there. Okay, so this is, finding your. So we talk about finding your background information. Now, you're really that's good that you've got all that information up there and you have access to it. I don't know when you have access to it, if that was put up after the fact, but this board docs is they can share it with the board, and then they can also share it with the public. So they may share it with board members a week in advance, and maybe they share it with the public after the meeting. But you can push them and say, what's secret? What's so secret about the strategic plan that you don't want to share it beforehand? I just like to read it. I just like to know where you're going, what with it. I just want to review it before the meeting. And then,
So Jan, just a
Yep.
question here. If that was the situation, would you do that in public comment, or would you do it just
you
directly
could do
to
that. You could do
directly
that.
to the superintendent?
Again,
or- Mhm.
Again, when we talk about that, it would be as an observer. You probably shouldn't be the one sharing it. It probably should be Tricia or the president or her designee that gets up and says, we're really disappointed that you're not sharing the information to the public that is going to be discussed at tonight's meeting. We don't understand what the secret is. And if you like, I can help you write something up, or you can, write it up yourself. But basically you just say, this is just getting information. We're not checking on you. We're not going to make sure that you don't change the slide presentation before you give the presentation. We just got a new superintendent, and she was a stinker about not sharing the information ahead of time. And I kept begging her. And I said, what's the secret? I mean, she wasn't sharing 2 agenda items. One was update on construction. We have a big construction project going. Well, all I have to do is drive around Elmhurst and I can see what the construction is. So what's the big secret about not sharing the information ahead of the meeting? And the other one was first week of school celebration. What was the big secret about that? Well, she said, I want to make sure that it's the most up-to-date information for the community. I said, aren't you concerned about sharing the most up-to-date information with the board first? So I finally got the board president who just said, just post it on the public. So that's what's happening now. We also discuss what you do with your report, how you write up your report. When it's something controversial, use actual quotes. So as I don't remember which one of your members said this, but I think was on the zoning committee, was it?
Planning Commission, I think.
The Planning Commission, right. So you didn't have, it's recorded. So you as an observer could go back and look at it. Or I used to bring this little itty bitty recorder to our committee meetings, the school board committee meetings. They never used to record them. So this is an itty bitty, and it's allowed. You can record any public meeting, except you cannot record the Illinois General Assembly because they make the rules, and they decided that they don't want to be recorded. So, so when you finish your report, you should let your report be reviewed by another person to make sure that there's no bias, that it's clear, and to avoid the partisanship. So we did have a league that got sued, and an observer that 4 or 5 years ago. A library board was not recorded. So it was he said, she said. We discussed this. LWVIL does have liability insurance. You have to make sure that you're a member of the League of Women Voters and that your name is on the roster. So if you think you're saving money by not, rostering somebody until right before January 31st, don't do that. Rostrum. So we discussed this whole situation about the liability. It ended up being dropped, but the library board member is an attorney, and just kept waiting until the very last minute and filed another motion and just was a stinker. Got thrown off the library board by the mayor and the city council. It was very unpleasant, and very unpleasant for the observer. But we do have this liability insurance, and it's for you, it's for us, and it's also for if you're having an in-person meeting and somebody trips, So again, this whole business about making sure that your membership is up, your roster's up to date, and what the liability insurance does. We get into this discussion. And then, of course, the organizational benefits to observer. You create a civically engaged and empowered group of observers. You're promoting open, transparent, and accountable government, educating the public, identifying areas where action or improvement is needed, and legal liability. So this is just a really brief overview. We do about an hour. And stop sharing. So we do about an hour.
So Jan, what do you, at your league, what do you do with the observer reports?
So with our league, I am the school board observer, and we have somebody who is the city council observer, and we exchange reports. So she reads mine, I read hers. One time I wrote up somebody was speaking about his child, and I said, oh, he was impassioned. He spoke passionately about his son who wanted to be in all-day kindergarten, or I don't know what it was about. And the other observer said, do you want to use that term? Nope, I do not. Going back to, Jack Webb and Just the Facts, Ma'am. Do you remember? Do you remember that crazy, was it Naked City? I don't even remember the name of the show, but you just report what happened. So last night I was at a school board committee meeting. It was the finance committee meeting. A couple of years ago, we passed a referendum for $168.5 million. And we are doing lots of construction. And they've started to address about 70% of that. And it's currently $15 or $16 million over budget. Going back to what Professor Houston said, I'm sorry, it was the editor of your local newspaper that said people don't want to know what happened last night. I guarantee you that there's a lot of taxpayers in Elmhurst that want to know what happened last night at that board meeting. And at that board meeting, they started talking about boundary changes. Yikes. That's a kiss of death for a school board member. And that was the first time a reporter, and it was a reporter from the Patch. I'm sure so we have an Elmhurst Patch. I'm sure there's a Champaign Patch, an online newspaper. And the fellow from the Patch covers a lot of different communities up here in the Chicagoland area. So he shows up, but he sits next to me and he says, who is that person? Oh, yeah. Okay, who's that one? All right. And I share information with him. But at the end of that meeting, he was so excited because he thought he could get 3 stories out of it. And, you know, at the end of the meeting, one board member was really irritated with the others and got up and left 2 or 3 minutes before the meeting ended. I reported that she left 3 minutes before the end of the meeting to go to a PTA meeting. But I guarantee you that the patch is going to report something that she stormed off, which she did do, to go to a PTA meeting. So.
So do you post your reports on your league website?
Yes, I'm sorry. So we post them on our website. I do our Facebook page, so then I post it on our Facebook page. We don't have a Twitter or an Instagram account, but if you did do that, you could do that as well. Cheryl had suggested what they do. Do you want to share?
Well, it never got off the ground because of lack of people power. But the idea would be to take a topic from a meeting and put it on Facebook and then link it to both our web page that would have the entire observer report. We do our observer reports by blog. And so you can sort them by date or by governmental unit, which is kind of interesting. It's LWVGP.org and then go to observer reports. But, you know, we have to have someone that's real comfortable with Facebook and has the time to take those snippets out and then put a link to the website, you know, the blog page, and also we wanted to link it to the governmental units recording. So if people wanted to see the whole recording of the meeting, they could have the link there. But it takes people power to do it, and we.
But the way around that is to put it in your report to say, okay, here's the agenda, and you can link the agenda there, and then here is the recording, and you can link that.
That's true.
So you
That's
can
true.
do that. But you know, it was like Cheryl said, I could put on Facebook, if you're interested to see why the referendum construction is $16 million over budget currently. Here's a link to the observer report from last night.
So Cheryl, when you say you have a blog, so then you have subscribers who sort of automatically get the report?
No, it's our website is Weebly, and they allow you to do a blog format, which the blog format allows us to separate the reports. Like I say, you can go by date is automatically set up. So you may have a city council report, then the next one might be county board, the next one might be landfill. So it's by the latest report. But you can also, if you just want to see the Peoria City Council, you can go to the side and click on Peoria City Council and then pull up all the observer reports for that. So there is no subscription. They just go to the observer reports on our website, and the setup is just a blog setup.
Yeah. So do you know of other leagues that do any other kinds of things with their observer reports?
Well, Jan's on Facebook. She actually puts the whole report on Facebook.
I link it. I link I put the link so that on Facebook, so that if you click on that, it goes to our website, to the actual report, to the full
Well,
report.
Trish, we also have a local monthly paper, and we're blessed in our organization to have several former Peoria Journal-Star reporters that are very active with our league. And one of them writes a monthly column to this community word. And she goes through all of the observer reports. The problem with the monthly is that they're pretty old by the time she has a deadline of like the 15th of the month. And that's the day after the county board meets, for example. And she can't manage to get that in. So the reports listed are more than a month old
Mhm.
because it's a county paper, but it's free. And
Yeah.
a lot of people read it because it's in depth.
So, Jan, do you ever look at the statistics for your Facebook postings to see how many people have looked at them? Or
Yeah. You know, so a couple of years ago, there was, it was during the summer, and we thought that one of the assistant superintendents was going to quit. So we show up at a committee meeting again, and and the superintendent says, "Oh, at a recent finance committee meeting, I was asked if I had $1 million, what would I do with it to improve student outcome?" And I said that we need coaches. We need instructional coaches at each school. Well, we have 8 grade schools, 3 middle schools, and a high school. So that, and so he was talking about 1 at each of these, plus an early childhood. So he was talking about 12 or 13 new hires in June, to hire them in June for September. So I write up this report, get it reviewed quickly, get it posted quickly, and then put on Facebook, if you're interested, this, there's going to be 13 new positions. The board is going to vote. This was a committee. So that was a Thursday. The board was meeting the following Tuesday. There were over 800 people who read that report before the Tuesday night meeting, because there were a lot of teachers who got a hold of it and passed it on to others to say, all right. And besides the fact that there was a big issue about, the superintendent said, oh no, that's going to come out of closed session because it's personnel. And he had to leave the meeting early to go watch his daughter play softball. So I follow him out and say, it's not a personnel issue. It's not talking about hiring Tricia Crowley as an instructional coach for York High School. It's about it's a budget change of $1 million. You're increasing the budget by $1 million. It has nothing to do with personnel. You're not talking about individuals. He said, well, I'll think about it. Well, the agenda for the meeting, the Tuesday night meeting, came out on Friday, and surprise, surprise, it was, supposed to come out under closed session. I got calls from 3 or 4 different board members over the weekend saying I had to change my report. And I said, no, I wasn't changing it. There was nothing wrong with it. I reported what happened. It was an open meeting. It wasn't a closed session meeting. And I just reported what happened. By the time the meeting did happen, it was discussed in open session and not in closed session. But
yeah. So that sounds like you can have impact if you're using, if you get the information out there promptly. That's really the whole question.
And what Cheryl was saying was, one of, to bring up the idea that we're over budget on all these buildings by 15 or 16 million dollars now. And the report says why. I mean, it's not, there's two vendors. There's one vendor for preformed concrete, and there's one vendor for water detention, things. So, I mean, it says why, but.
So, Jan, thank you very much for doing this presentation, and we'll hopefully we can find a few more people who want to be observers, and also if we have observers who haven't gone through the training, they can sign up on January 6th.
We have some more, we have more resources that once you go through the training, you get linked to a possible, you can format it this way, or you could do it that way, whatever. There's, you get access to the PowerPoint, you get access to, there's the Citizen Advocacy Center information on FOIA and Open Meetings Act. There's several different resources there that would be available to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I know it's 8 o'clock and we're scheduled for a 1-hour meeting. If anyone would like to keep talking about what we can do at our league with current observer reports, then let's keep talking. But I don't want to keep anyone who's we committed to an hour meeting and it's been an hour. And I also want to thank Brant and Jan for participating, because we know this is a problem. We have to work on solutions, and maybe the first time out we maybe don't get the exact right solution, but we have to keep refining it so that news about local governments can get shared in a better way. And also, that the observers are spending hours and hours every month doing this. We ought to make it impact somehow. So Cheryl,
Tricia, could I say that we recently sent a letter to the county board because our observer thought that the county board went to such great lengths to be open and transparent with how they did redistricting. And so the observer sent our president, Terry Colbus, the points that he thought were important. And because of that, they sent, the president sent a letter to all the county board members, and they're very aware that we have an observer there. And it said, thank you for this process and how open it was, and how you respected people's input. And so that's another way observers can make a difference, because the county is getting positive feedback on something they do.
all right. So currently we do post our observer reports on the website, but we've been doing them annually, right? Annually. So it's not in any way fresh information. It's sort of more a record of what's happening. So I think as we've been discussing here, the freshness of what we do is what has to be pushed out. And so we need to discuss perhaps a better way of doing reports and how to distribute them. So current observers, I'll be in touch with current observers so we can discuss this in some more detail, and anyone else who is at all interested in not making a commitment, just interested, send me an email and I'll make sure that you're included in the discussion. I think our observers, we have some very, very long time observers. They know their government body very well. It's
that's a big plus, Tricia. That's a really big plus. And when new people start at the district, I mean, they've asked me, you know, where is that information, or why is this way, you know?
Yeah. So I'm not, one of the big barriers we have is, I'm an old lady. I don't do Facebook. So trying to figure out how to do that myself, or else get coordination with other league members who are younger and more hip, is that's what we used to say, right? Who can do that, maybe part of the process. But I know I've been an observer for, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 20 years, and it's always interesting. But whether it's affecting, impacting is the issue I think we're facing now, because local news is not doing what it used to do. So when I've worked in government, for 30 years, and there was a time when every single meeting was a story. There might have been a story the day before and a story the day after, and that's just not the case anymore. So, any questions? Any discussion? And Ruth, you weren't raising your hand, were you? No. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any comments? Or I really think we have to think about this from the bottom up, and make the commitment of the observers worth something. So that's going to be our project here. Any other questions? Do you see anyone have their hand raised or has a question, Ann? No?
Nope.
Okay, well then with that, I'll conclude the meeting, and thank you all very much for coming. And this is some way in which the league can make a difference in our community, and that's what we're trying to do. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.